again, it is time to get caught up with Bishop D.D. Gales and change the way you view the world.
I'm a hand on my feet, you, crooked letter I, N, E, crooked letter. Let's go. I'm a hand on my business, I'ma be about my business, I'ma go and handle this business, cause it's kingdom, I'm a hand on my business, I'ma be about my business, I'ma go and handle this business, cause it's kingdom, I'ma handle my business. In the streets, walking, I get a witness. You best be listening or you gon' miss it. You best to keep yourself in tip-top business. Bringing in men like we willing and vicious. Love to eat the word and hate to clean the dishes. Now I'm thinking again, exceed all of your wishes. Can overcome a million of Judas's kisses. We love on the dog and pray for the misses. Free the hungry, now that's my business. Preach to the poor, now that's my business. Tread on the snake whenever he hears it. Ain't got more punch than 1,000 visits. You got an army that you can enlist in. With a calling, no wonder my sister. Tell them that you want to be down with the business. Don't call my business, I'm a hand of my business. I'ma be about my business. I'ma go and handle this business. Cause it's kingdom. I'ma handle my business. I'ma be about my business. I'ma go and handle this business. Cause it's kingdom. I'm not trying to make a sale, cause this right here is about heaven and hell. See the kingdom first and you can stack your mail. Do it that way if there's no way that you can tell. And if the homies in the hood follow your trail. My business is all about the children. Innocent lives been lost from this killing. The streets are dying and the world needs a healing. Gotta move cause I got that feeling. There's about to be a shift in the game. Everybody's gotta get into the name. The sun will shine, it will take away the rain. One day my God is gonna take away the pain. Some people in your circle will not get this. You gotta break away from all the misfits. There's too much writing on this, homie, don't risk it. Stop playing games, I'm about my business. I'ma be about my business. I'ma go and handle this business. Cause it's kingdom. Cause it's kingdom. I'ma be about my business. I'ma go and handle this business. We got so many lives to say. Can I get a witness? Everybody.
Hey yo, you already know what it is when the business pop off. You guess right, homie, yes, Mr. Pop off. On track with that top door that can't get knocked off. It's Canton, can we carry on a hot song? Kingdom is life for us, so you get the same thing, homie, even if the camera's not on. The only time we front is shotgun. Get that, get back. I need a little space when I drop songs. Balling about mine, do what I'm told. Fresh out the red clothes, and I be after the soul. Before and after the album sold, but on the strip, I'm really more concerned about the path you chose. Choose life and the cash you roll, like the wheels on a Cadillac before the casket closed. Thank God for that classic flow. That track before the kingdom of God, let's go.
Hey, everybody out there in Facebook and YouTube land, how are you guys doing today? It's been a busy week. I had to do a lot to get this office ready for this broadcast. As you know, I told you guys in the last video that, I had the radio show, but because of COVID-19, they have consistently kept the radio station closed. They will not let us in to do our shows. So I canceled my contract after 3 months. I've been on the air for about 5 years now. So I was just like, you know what? There's no sense in me keeping going. So let me just go ahead and find something, another way to get the message out to you guys. And I really do like the platform that I'm using right now. It's been working well for me. Hopefully you guys like it better because I'm able to share more information with you guys. I think it's way more interactive. So I really do love it. So today, and then I spent all week getting my office ready. The lighting, I got to get used to it. This bright light in my face, so I got to get used to it. So, but today's topic, we're just going to jump right in because we do got a lot we're going over today. So today's topic is, of course, as you know, police brutality and domestic violence. They are the same. And if you don't know, the meme that you see right here, I posted it on Facebook not too long ago. I actually created this meme myself just because it was just something I felt like needed to be addressed. And if you go further down on my page, you'll see it. It's been shared about 50 times. And what kind of sparked my interest is that when I was looking at all the shares and all the comments on the shares, you know, there were a lot of people who didn't get the correlation between the two, and they don't understand why I put the meme up there or why the connection was being made. First of all, they didn't know it was a Black person that even did the meme, but they didn't understand the correlation between the two instances. So just to let you know what the meme says, it says, are we really protesting this while staying silent on this? And then it says, we got to do better, Black people. So, I read a lot of the comments on the meme, and one guy even said that he felt like it was a white person who did the meme in an effort to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement and these two things, da, 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 da. No. So it's me. I'm Black. I created this meme. So the reason why I created the meme is because there is a correlation between police brutality and domestic violence. And I'm not saying that there are no advocacy groups in the Black community. They're just few and far between. And most of the time, those groups that are in the Black community are not head up by Black people. They're usually like, you know, the Salvation Army or other groups that were spearheaded by white people who saw a need for that type of program in our community. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the battered women's shelters. I'm thankful for all those resources that are available in our neighborhood for victims of domestic violence. But this meme is addressing our reaction as a whole, as a race, as Black people towards domestic violence. And the fact that we can rally around police brutality, we can protest, we can demonstrate, we can march, we can come together. That is something that everybody within the Black community can agree on, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of any other belief, regardless of sexuality, regardless of any of the things that normally divide us as the Black race. We all can come together on the idea that police brutality is wrong. Racial injustice is wrong. Racial inequality is wrong. That is something that we can all come together on, be it male or female, is police brutality. But there needs to be a time where we as a race, regardless of religion, regardless of gender, regardless of sex, regardless of any of the things that normally divide us, should be able to come together when it comes to the issue of domestic violence. But yet my experience within the Black community is that's not the case. We do not come together and rally around victims of domestic violence as a race the same way we are doing when it comes to victims of police brutality. So what do I mean by this? When you have a female, and I'm not saying that men are not victims of domestic violence. Let me just get that out the way now, because I know what the typical responses are. Men too, women hit men too. We know, okay? So I'm speaking on behalf of all victims of domestic violence. But I specifically mention women because women have been more victimized when it comes to domestic violence than men. And women suffer more violent attacks than men. Not saying that men don't, because women have killed their husbands, and women can be very violent too. But more often than not, the victims of domestic violence are female. So my issue is that oftentimes in the Black community, when there's an instance of domestic violence, it's not seen as the broad, brush of wrong. I've actually seen instances where females defend men who beat women. I've seen instances where men take up for other men who beat their women or wives. Whereas you will never see a black person defend an officer for beating and abusing and committing police brutality against a black person. So my thing is, if there is no justification for police brutality, then there should never be a justification for domestic violence. And I don't care who the perpetrator is, be it male or female, or who the victim is, be it male or female. There should never be a justification. And see, what I've been paying attention to and what irritates us black people is that when there's an instance of police brutality, especially when there's a white cop and a black suspect or a black victim, we often have white people justifying the police officer. Well, that person, like with George Floyd, what do you hear people say? Well, he was a criminal. He wasn't a good person. He wasn't this and he wasn't that. Or other instances, they were resisting arrest, or they were doing this, or they were doing that. And we get angry at those justifications. We get angry when we hear that being said, because we know that that's not a justification for taking somebody's life. That's not a justification for beating somebody within an inch of their life. That's not a justification for some of the behaviors that we see police inflict on victims. And that's victims of all colors, not just black victims, because police don't only beat up on us. They beat up on other races too. But it's a lot of times it's happening to us, simply because we're black. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. So my thing is, within the black community, because I can't speak for other races. I can't speak for what goes on in the white community when a man beats his wife. I can't speak on that. I've only seen movies on that. And from what I've witnessed, the justifications are kind of the same. But I will say this. As a black race, I've noticed that when there's an instance of domestic violence, when a man is hitting his woman, and especially if we weren't there to witness what happened, and sometimes even if we are there to witness what happened, we won't get involved. We might be like, stop, hey, what's going on? But we usually don't get involved. We don't try to stop it. And then if it was an instance of something that we didn't even see or witness with our own eyes, we'll even question if it's true. How many times you think, she just trying to bring a brother down. She's just trying to tear him down. What she do? Man, he ain't hit her. I ain't never known him to be violent. So we got to be careful that the same justifications that we get upset over when it comes to police brutality are not the same justifications we're using to justify domestic violence. Because they are the same. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing we're going to get into, give me a moment, because I got a new thing set up here where I'm kind of
Tell everyone to tune in.
Bear with me, y'all. Where I'm kind of able to share my notes and stuff with you so you guys can look at this with me. But what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to break this down according to a couple of bullet points that I put together here. We're going to be talking about the mindset behind police brutality. Then we're going to talk about the mindset behind domestic violence. And then we're going to discuss how they use some of the same justifications, almost identical. And we're going to talk about the fact how both perpetrators operate on the idea of superiority, and how victims need immediate separation from abusers. And I'm going to discuss police as well, because there could be remedies for immediate separation of abusive police officers from the community. They need to be separated from the community. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, of course, is, like I said, the mindset behind police brutality. So, looking at the PowerPoint, the mindset behind police brutality begins with manipulation. An abusive police officer can be very manipulative because when they get on the scene, when they're racially profiling you, if it's a racial stop, or if they're stopping you just because they're in a bad mood and they want somebody they want to mess with and pick with. First thing they're going to kind of, because you're figuring out like, why are you stopping me? Why are you bothering me? I mean, what's going on here? Like with the guy in the grocery store, like at Walmart, the guy that just got beat up over the bike. That was just a ridiculous situation. And those abusive police officers wanted to, try to get him to accept what they were doing to him as what they were supposed to be doing. And they wanted to, and then another thing about manipulative, abusive police officers is they want you to believe that their behavior is the standard for their profession. And then they will turn around and blame you for their abuse and their brutality. And then another thing about the mindset behind police brutality is that the intimidation, the threats, and the controlling nature of abusive police officers. They use their power, position, or fear to force compliance instead of proper communication, rational reasoning, and mutual respect. We're going to get into this a little bit deeper on each point. I just want to give you an idea of where we're going. And then the mindset behind police brutality is also a dominating and abusive mindset. To act without cause or proper authority, to go against someone's rights and free will, and force them to comply to unreasonable demands by use or threat of use of weapons or physical violence. Another thing that's common in the mindset of police brutality is a superiority complex. It's the idea that because of who or what they are better or higher than you. Therefore, you must obey them without question or suffer the retaliation or the consequences thereof. Now, another mindset behind police brutality is also bias, viewing someone negatively or with less respect because of their affiliation to a particular group or culture. And I do want to point out that cops do not only react, they are not only violent based on racial bias. There are many biases that exist that will cause a police officer to be abusive besides race. Not all officers that commit police brutality on a regular basis do it because of race. Even if it's against Black people, even if it's against a Black person, it does not necessarily mean that this officer is racist. But they are still abusive and they are still committing police brutality, but not all police brutality is race-based. There are other biases that exist that can cause an officer to be abusive and commit brutality. And that's some of the things we're going to get into with this video as well. So let me go to the next, bear with me, the next, okay. I just skipped through all of them. Give me a moment. This is why I told you to bear with me because I'm getting used to using some of these different features. So just bear with me. Okay, so we want to talk about the definition of, let me go back through. So we do have to go through each one of these. I'm so sorry. We do have to, give me just a moment. Let me just peek through. I have to look at something. Okay, yeah, so let's go back through and we're going to start back with manipulation. Getting to you to accept their behavior as normal, the standard, or your fault. So this is when the police officer comes on the scene and they're just letting you know, I'm just doing my job. This is what we do. This is just, standard operating procedure. I'm just doing. Now they could be completely racially profiling you. They could be pulling you over just because you're Black, but they will try to get you to believe that what they're doing is within the standard operating procedure. What they're doing is behavior that is considered normal for their profession. So they don't want you to think that what they're up to is anything that you need to worry about. They're going to try to convince you of that. Okay, so then they're going to go into the intimidating, threatening, and controlling behavior. So then they're going to, now this might not be something that they verbalize. This could be the officer that comes up to the car with his hand on his gun. He's already intimidating you with the fact that he has a gun. And he's using a silent threat of physical damage or bodily harm because he got his hand on the gun. That's kind of letting you think, yeah, I can shoot you. But they won't say it yet because they walk up to the car with that intent. That's the reason why we understand, like, why do cops come up to the car with their guns automatically drawn? I mean, you don't even know what's going on. They already got their hand on their gun. Like, well, wait a minute. If this is just a traffic stop, why you got your hand on their gun? When you see an officer come up to your car, these are the things you need to look for. When you see an officer coming, you know, first of all, that you ain't doing nothing wrong. And you already know this officer is violating your rights. And they're trying to convince you that they're not doing nothing wrong to get you to comply anyway. Then you need to realize automatically you're dealing with the manipulative officer. And he might be abusive. So you got to start to look for the signs of an abusive person. And these will help you understand the mindset behind an abusive person, including police brutality. They're going to be manipulative. When they pull you over and they know you ain't doing nothing wrong, or when they stop you walking down the street and you know you haven't done nothing wrong, the first thing they're going to try to do is get you through manipulation to accept what it is they're trying to do to you and comply to what they want. Now, they're going to try to use the slick letting go. Like, oh, there was a suspect in the area, or you matched the suspect that we're looking for, or you were looking shady, or you were looking suspicious. That's them trying to make you believe that what they're doing is normal. And it's your fault that they're stopping you. They're stopping you because you look suspicious. And it's their job to stop you because you look suspicious. That's manipulation. They're trying to mind... That's the term, I can't use it, but they're trying to get you to believe that what they're doing is well within their right as an officer. I'm not stopping you just because you're black. I'm stopping you because you match the description of a suspect. I'm not stopping you because of anything other than the fact that you look suspicious. Not because you're black, though, just because you look suspicious. So that's the manipulate. When you realize that that this officer is trying to get you to believe something that you know not true, that's manipulation. So you automatically should know that you're dealing with an abusive person, possibly, because it may not lead to violence. But if they're already starting off manipulating you, trying to get you to believe that this illegal stop or this illegal search and seizure or this unreasonable line of question is something that they're well within their right to do because of something you're doing, you should already know that you might be dealing with a situation that could lead to police brutality automatically. Just automatically assume that, think that, and conduct yourselves accordingly. So then the second thing we said was intimidating, threatening, and controlling. Using their power, position, or fear to force compliance. So then when the manipulation doesn't work, when they can't get you to accept it, because we've experienced it, you've seen it happen. This is where we're not buying what they're saying. Like you pulled me over for nothing. You stopped me for nothing. I haven't committed any crimes. I don't look like a suspect. Why are you bothering me? So then when you get combative with them, then they're going to roll over to intimidating, threatening, and then controlling behavior. And this is when they're beginning to use the power that they have and use the position and the fear of what they can do to you to force you to comply. Now, at first, they're going to try to manipulate you to comply. They're going to ask you several times to manipulate you to get you to comply to what they want you to do. And then if that doesn't work, then the mindset of an abusive police officer is going to move to intimidating you to do what they want, threatening you to do. So now when they walked up to you with the gun on, a hand on their gun, they might pull the gun out and pull it on you. and say, look, this is what I want you to do. You're going to do what I said. Now, instead of using proper communication, proper communication, like, okay, this is the reason why I'm stopping you. This is the reason why I'm making this request. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to profile you. I'm doing this for this particular reason. They give you some kind of rational explanation as to what they're doing. And they do it in a respectful manner. They're not doing it like you're beneath them, or you gotta you gotta do it, even though you kind of gotta do it. But they come to you with some kind of respect. So that officer is not going to move to that. He's going to go to the abuse of power immediately. They're going to pull out the gun and try to intimidate you and make you do it. Then they're going to threaten you with some physical bodily harm to get control of you and make you do what they want you to do. When you in that situation, when an officer starts to try to threaten you or intimidate you, wake up. You might be in a situation where this officer will actually commit some type of physical violence against you unwarranted. Because if they will escalate from trying to manipulate you into believing that what they're doing is right when it's dead wrong, to intimidating you and threatening you with the use of force, then you have to pull back, whoa, wait a minute. You might need to really, and I hate to say this, you might really want to think about complying with what they want, because this officer is giving you the clues that you need to know prior to it escalating to this point that this officer might brutalize you or even kill you. So you might want to think about it. So then, if that doesn't work, if the threat doesn't work, then they're going to move to being dominating and abusive. This is when they're going to act without cause or proper authority. This has nothing to do with their legal right to do this to you. They're going to dominate you at that point, because to dominate you means they throw your rights out of the window and it's about what they want, and they're going to dominate the situation. And that's against your will. They're going to violate your rights at that point. It's against your will, and they're going to force you to comply to their unreasonable demands by use of or threat of use of weapons or physical violence. Now, this is when the officer is going to verbally threaten you, or probably verbally already then put his hands on you to do something and make you and force you to comply. Now, this is when you realize now you're dealing with a situation that is going to be abusive. You're dealing with a situation that is going to end not well for you at this particular point. When an officer moves from being to being dominating and abusive, when they are forcing you physically to comply to their unreasonable demand, then you know you're dealing with an officer that is abusive. And then another mindset that's behind police brutality is the superiority complex. It's the idea that because of who you are or what they are, that they are somehow better than you. Therefore, you must obey them without question or suffer the retaliation as a result. So this is the officer that doesn't feel like he needs to explain anything to you. He doesn't have to tell you why he wants you to do anything. You just got to do it because he's a cop and he said so. You got to do it because he's in a position of authority and power over you physically, because he got a gun and you don't. So you got to do what he said. That's that superiority mind complex. And you can tell when you're dealing with an officer like that. You have to pay attention to what these officers say. And this is going to require us as citizens is to come down off our attitude when dealing with officers. Because sometimes that attitude that you have will block your ability to see the signs that you're dealing with an abusive police officer. And you're dealing with somebody who could possibly kill you. So then another mindset behind police brutality is bias. Viewing somebody negatively or with less respect because of their affiliation to a particular group or culture. And I keep in mind, I did say cops do not only react on racial biases. There are other biases that exist. Now, we do understand that a lot of times between white cops and black suspects, that there could be a racial factor there. But that is just really not always the case. Even when police brutality happens, it might not even be because you black. It could be because that officer really is just crazy. And it could have been anybody he pulled over that was going to get it. So it might not always be an instance of a cop being racist. Now, you can kind of tell the difference if it's racist because they're going to say the racist lingo. They're going to say the little stuff that let you know that it's racist. But if their thing is really more about you doing what I say, you're dealing with a person that has an issue of control. And that control could be with a white person or a black person or whatever. It's whatever group that they particularly hate. And it might not even be black people. It could be women. They could not hate rich. They can hate rich people. They might not like ethnic groups. They might not like people of certain religions. They might not. You never know what a person's bias is that will lead them to be abusive. So not all instances of police brutality is race-based. I just want to get that out there. Even though a lot of them are, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them is just a situation of somebody with a superiority complex based on whatever bias they have. And it may not be race-based. So I want to get that out there. So going over to the next slide, I wanted to go over the definition of bias. I want to make sure we understand what the definition of bias is, because that's going to lead us into how police brutality and domestic violence is the same once we get an understanding of what the word bias is. Now, bias is viewing someone negatively or with less respect because of their affiliation to a particular group of culture or culture. Now, looking up, I went to the dictionary because, that was my lingo for the word bias. But I wanted to give you the definition from the dictionary of what the word bias means. So from dictionary.com, bias is a particular tendency, trend, or inclination, feeling, or opinion, especially one that is preconceived or unreasoned. And unreasonably hostile feelings or opinions about a social group. Prejudice. And then they use the example of accusations of racial bias. Are ethnic groups considered social groups? Yes. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, those are also considered social groups. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to Britannica.com and you will learn that that ethnic groups are also considered social groups and vice versa. Are the sexes considered social group? Male, female? Yes, they are also considered social groups. So that leads us to the mindset behind domestic violence. It is the same as the mindset behind police brutality. Manipulation, getting you to accept their behavior, intimidation, threatening and controlling, dominating and abusive, superiority complex, bias. Now, the only difference with the bias part of an abusive relationship when you're dealing with domestic violence is that bias is usually not, well, sometimes can be based on race, but usually is not an issue of race. But partners do not only react on sexual bias either. They don't. There are many biases that exist that a person can have, but based on their feelings about whatever particular group they put you in, they think that they have a right with their superiority complex to abuse you. I know a lot of people don't want to see the correlation between the two, but they are the same. So now we want to talk about some of the justifications that are used, because they both use the same justifications. And we talked about them a little bit earlier. They were normalization. They were making it seem normal, making it look like the standard, and making you feel like it's your fault. So normalization, they try and convince you that their behavior and actions are normal and something is wrong with you for having a problem with their behavior. Now, what does this sound like coming from a police officer? I'm just trying to do my job, but you keep refusing to answer my questions or do as I say. If you don't have anything to hide, then what's the problem? So they want you to think that because they're coming up, then this could be racially profiled, it could be whatever the reason that they came up to you that was wrong. They want to make it seem like it's something wrong with you for not accepting their behavior. If you ain't got nothing to hide, then what's the problem? If you ain't got nothing to hide, then you should answer my questions. You should let me search your car. You should have no issue with me searching you. If you ain't got nothing to hide, never mind if it's an illegal search and seizure. Never mind if you stop me for absolutely nothing or pull me over for absolutely nothing. They try to make you feel like their actions are normal. You're the one that with the problem because if you ain't got nothing to hide. Now, how does it sound with an abusive spouse? Well, all I did was, and all I said was, I just asked a simple question. I just made a simple request, but you had to. You just gotta be. Is it wrong for a man to want this for his woman or to want his woman this? The same types of normalization. The man not wrong for asking and making the unreasonable request. The man is not wrong for asking the unreasonable question. He's not wrong. You're wrong. Because you didn't respond the way he wants you to respond to the request. All I said was, but you got to be this, and you got to be a B word, and you got to always do this. That's them blaming you. It's your fault because you don't accept their behavior as normal because something wrong with you. Because you got to be a B word. You got to be this, and you got to be that. And then they ask them, oh, is it wrong for a woman to expect her man to be this? Is it wrong for a man to expect his woman this? Is it wrong for this and is it wrong for that? Yeah. Making unreasonable requests from your spouse is wrong. If they say no, then that's the answer. And it's not right to try to make your unreasonable request of them normal by making it seem like it's their fault for having an issue with your request in the first place. We got to start thinking about and paying attention to communications in relationships. So then standardization. That's another justification. They try to convince you or educate you that it is somehow they're all like that. Like police officers try to get, this is how we are. This is what we do to get you to accept their behavior. They speak in very general terms. And this is what usually happens. This is the standardization that's used after the abuse that happened, after the brutality has happened. Then that's when you might hear the officer say, well, see, when officers come on the scene, or when an officer asks you a question, you do this, and you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to do that. Never mind if it's unreasonable. Never mind if it's something that they're not supposed to do. When an officer steps on the scene, you're supposed to do this. When an officer asks you this, you're supposed to do this. Or things might not end well for you. Or you might end up in jail. Or you might end up dead on that street corner. That's standardization because they're speaking in very general terms. They don't say when I step on the scene. The officers say when officers step on the scene. When an officer asks you a question, you are to do this and you are to do this or things might not end well for you. That is a standardization to justify their abuse. That's a standardization to justify their brutality. Now, what does it sound like when it comes from a spouse? What did you expect to happen? Ain't nobody gonna put up with you. Now, not the man saying or the woman saying, I'm not gonna put up with it. They'll say, ain't nobody gonna put up with it. Like no man is going to put up with your behavior. No woman is going to put up with your behavior. They speaking now for all men and all women. Ain't nobody going to put up with that. What did you expect? Now this is after he done beat your tail or she done smacked you in the head with a skillet. They gonna try to make it. They gonna try to justify their behavior because what did you expect to happen because of what you did? Ain't nobody gonna put up with this. That's standardization, making their behavior the standard for their group of people. Officers, abusive officers, try to make their behavior the standard for all officers by speaking in these general terms. Just like abusive spouses try to make their abuse the standard or their reactions the standard for everybody within their sex. So we got to pay attention to the abusive personalities and find a way to get away from that. So then we're going to move on to the next one. The last one. This is the one that I kind of wanted to really get into because this is the big one. The it's your fault justification. And we've heard this in police brutality, the it's your fault. It's the victim's fault that they got brutalized. It's the victim's fault they got shot and killed. It's the victim's fault. Not the police, the trigger-happy cop. Not the anger-fueled cop. Not the trigger-happy spouse or the anger-fueled spouse. It's your fault that you got brutalized, beat up, or killed. It's your fault. That's another justification that abusers use. Both of them use it. People who commit domestic violence and people who commit police brutality all use the justification of it's your fault. What does it sound like from a police officer? Let's read. If you would have just complied and did as you were told, none of this would have happened. How does it sound from an abusive spouse? If you would just listen and do what I tell you, we wouldn't have to go through this. Like they somehow a victim of what you did. How does it sound like from an officer? I felt threatened. They hit me. I thought they had a weapon or was going for a weapon. What does it sound like? What does it's your fault sound like from an abusive spouse? They hit me first. They was trying to kill me. They was going for a weapon. She was about to go get a knife. He was about to go get it there. And they was about to go get this to justify their abuse. They gonna make it your fault. And see, that's the judge. Now, see, don't them justifications sound, you can't tell if I'm talking about a police officer or an abusive mate. Because they use the same justifications. It's somehow your fault what they did to you. How does another one, how does it, let me give you another justification. This is from an officer. They were mouthing off and resisting arrest. Isn't that a justification you hear a lot from police? They were mouthing off and resisting arrest, so therefore that justified them beating you within an inch of your life. You were mouthing off and resisting arrest, so that gave them every right to choke you to death. You were mouthing off and resisting arrest, that gave them a right to stun you 50 times with a stun gun. You were mouthing off and resisting arrest, and that gave them right to shoot you and kill you dead. Now, what does that sound like from an abusive spouse? They was running off at the mouth, disrespecting me, telling me what they ain't gonna do. Don't that sound like some of these abusive men? Don't it sound like some of even abusive women? Don't they sound alike? Now you understand what I'm saying, that domestic violence and police brutality are the same. And if we're going to be out here in the streets rallying against police brutality, protesting police brutality, and see, I feel like the only reason why we protest police brutality, and not just because it's wrong, because we got somebody to point that anger to. We can point it to the man. But when it comes to protesting domestic violence, we point fingers at us now. And see, we don't want to do that. Because then that might stroke at your conscience. Because were you ever the woman that was justifying another man's abusing his spouse? Were you ever the woman who said, well, what did she do? What did he do? I ain't never known him to be that way. Or were you the dude that was having your friend's back knowing he was beating his wife? See, when people don't want to confront domestic violence in the Black community, because guess what? Everybody guilty. Even if you haven't been a perpetrator of domestic violence, you're guilty if you've ever defended somebody that committed domestic violence. You're guilty if you've ever ridiculed, ostracized, or talked down on a victim of domestic violence. Why don't she just leave him? Why she must love it. She keeps staying there. Never mind, you understand there's a manipulation there. There's a mind thing there. That's what makes domestic violence so worse. That's what makes it worse than police brutality. Because between the officer and a victim, ain't no love there. You don't love that cop. That cop ain't claiming to love you. Ain't no love there. There's nothing you really expect from that cop except for them to treat you somehow fairly. But, we should know that ain't happening by now sometimes. But when you're in a relationship with a spouse, you got to understand there's a daily manipulation. There's a daily chipping away at somebody's self-esteem and barriers and stuff. There's a mental thing that's there. So that's what makes domestic violence so worse. Because this is a person that you expect to care. This is a person that you expect to love you. This is a person that is supposed to treat you in a certain way. But yet they're not. So that's what makes domestic violence and police brutality the same, but yet makes domestic violence even worse. Because you may or may not be, you're not financially dependent on a police officer. You're not living with a police officer, not demeaning police brutality, but if you survive it, you don't have to deal with that person no more. But what if you're the wife or a husband, you're financially relying on this abusive spouse, and it ain't as easy for you to up and walk away? Like, I was a victim of domestic violence, but it was easy for me to separate because I financially can take care of myself. But I know that there are a lot of women that are not in that situation where they can just up and leave because some abusers are very smart. They know how to keep the purse strings to keep you codependent on them. So then you kind of feel like there's no escape of the abuse. Doesn't mean they don't want to leave, but it's how can they leave? So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind when it comes to victims of domestic violence. Nobody wants to get beat up on. Nobody wants to have black eyes and busted lips, broken ribs. Nobody wants to go through that. So if you see a person that's going through that, I'm not telling you to jump in their business because some women and some spouses are truly brainwashed because they've dealt with the manipulation for so long that it's hard for them to leave. So I'm not telling you to jump in somebody's business and try to force them to leave, but I'm telling you to show more compassion to victims of domestic violence. Speak out against domestic violence. You never know if your words will change something that somebody is going through. If abusive people had less of a support system for their abuse, then maybe they would change their abusive behavior. or address their abusive behavior. But as long as they got justifications and people helping them with their justifications, then they'll never see any need to change their behavior. So we as a society need to have the same no-nonsense approach and a zero tolerance approach to domestic violence as we do with police brutality. We need to make sure that you have zero tolerance for somebody who is abusing a spouse. If you got a friend, what do I mean by zero tolerance? Let me ask you a question. If you know that, say for instance, you friends with a white person, and you find out that this white person is racist, and they're out there and they're a police officer and they're brutalizing black people, are you still gonna be friends with them? No. So why are you still friends with your dude that you know beating his wife? Why is you still friends with your dude that you know beating his girlfriend? Why is you still friends with your girl that you know smack her dude upside the head with a skillet? Why are you still friends with these people? That's accepting their behavior without saying a word. That's letting them know that their behavior is okay without even saying it's okay. If people don't feel accepted in what they do, because the thing I know about abusive people is that it's rooted in some kind of insecurity too. It's rooted in hatred and insecurity. So if they can have a haven to run to when they're abusing, your boy come knock on your door 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and you know he beat his wife. You know he abuses his wife. Man, I just need a place to crash. She over there tripping. No, because you know he didn't beat her. He can't come stay with you. Don't let him come live with you. Don't let her come crash on your couch. Send their butt back out there. Let him find a place to lay, but don't give him the place to lay. If we put the same stigma on domestic violence as we do with police brutality, we can see less domestic violence in our communities. We can see women and men living in safer homes. But we're not. We're not putting the same stigma on it. How can you be friends with somebody that beat women? An innocent, defenseless woman. How can you be friends with somebody that you know is beating up on a man that you know not being violent to her? If you think police brutality is wrong and you want abusive and brutal cops off the force, they should be fired and thrown in jail, then where's that same energy when it comes to domestic violence? Come on, black people. And I'm not just talking about black people. White people beat up on each other too. But the reason why I'm talking to my people, black people, is because we the one out there protesting police brutality. And I know some white folks out there, but they on our cause Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter, then that black life getting the snot beat out of them by their husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or wife should matter. And sometimes it don't take you saying nothing directly to the abuser, because that might not work well for the person being abused. But you can let it be known that that's not something you approve of. That's not something you gonna be friends with. That's not something you want around you. And if you ostracize and isolate abusers enough, then maybe they'll see the need to change their behavior, to repent of their actions. If we put the stigma on that we do on police brutality, we can see some change in our communities. Because I can tell you this, the number of women getting beat on a daily basis by their spouse far outweighs the number of people that are victims of police brutality on a daily basis. Did you know that 40% of police officers are guilty of domestic violence within their own homes? That should tell you something. And there's a reason why I brought that up, because that goes to the next thing that we're going to talk about. Give me a minute. I'm trying to. Now, we talked about they both operate on the same idea of superiority. Is there anything I need to hit on that again? Yeah, I want to talk about that. They both operate on the idea of superiority. Let me bring this up so you can look at it. The idea, because of who or what they are better or higher than you. Therefore, you must obey them without question or suffer the retaliation. Police officers use their position, authority, and artillery, meaning their guns, their weapons, as a thing that makes them feel like they're superior or have more authority. And you know this is true because you've heard victims say to the police officer, if you ain't had that gun, I bet you this. Take that badge off. Let's see what's going on now. If you wasn't no cop, I bet you this. So we know that they using their position, authority, and their weapons, their artillery, to make them feel like, that they're superior and better than others, that they can get away with their abuse. And then some police officers feel like they're better than you because of your race. White officers thinking they're better than black officers. You got black officers that think they're better than regular black people. Because 2 of my children have been brutalized at the hands of black police officers. Let me say this again. Make sure you hear me. 2 of my children, my son, my oldest son, and my daughter, were victims of police brutality at the hands of black officers. So it ain't just a black and white issue. It's an issue of it just control and being out of it. So police brutality comes in all colors. I was a victim of police brutality at the hands of a white officer. So believe me, our black officers are not above being brutal against our own people. So when you come face to face with a black cop or a white cop, have some sense, because you don't know which one you're dealing with. That black cop can be just as prone to violence as a white cop. I seen a video where this black police officer cop punched this black lady in her face for no reason. Yeah, she was up in his face talking some crap though, but she didn't touch him. And he just hauled off and just punched her. Now, officers are supposed to show more restraint than that. That's how you know he beating his wife at home. Okay? And so then I want to reiterate the fact that not all police brutality against blacks is racially motivated, even if it's a white cop. Because some white cops have, they just straight psychopaths. Let me just when I say they're just, some cops are just psychopaths. So it don't matter what color you are, it don't matter what sex you are, they just gonna beat whoever they feel like beating. Because they just crazy psychopaths. Okay? Now, the abusive spouse, they use the exact same thing. They both operate in their position. Husband might be in a position their perceived position, because most abusive men think that because they're the man or they're the husband, they somehow have a right to discipline their wife like she a 2-year-old. He has a right to beat his wife like she's not even a grown-up. And I know some cultures, women are treated and viewed as property. So therefore he can beat and treat her the way they want. And we got some black men who think the same way. And y'all don't get me wrong, I know there's white men who think the same way too, but we talking about us today. There's some black men that view their wives as property. They might not even say it though. I'm gonna tell you this. They slick with it. They might not say that they see you as property, but the way they treat you, believe me, you gonna know they view you as property. And they use their authority, whatever authority they have. If they make the most money, if they own the property, whatever type of authority they got over you, whatever they got to keep you there, they use that. That's their authority. That's their position. If they're the breadwinner in the house, oh my God, if you're dealing with an abusive man and he make all the money, I feel sorry for you, boo. That's a tough situation. Okay? That's a tough situation to be in. I wouldn't wish that on nobody. And then they also use their physical strength. That's their artillery. That's their weapon, is their physical strength that they have over you, because most men are stronger than the woman. That's the reason why the Bible tells you to treat the woman as if she's the weaker vessel. But he didn't mean that in an abusive way. He mean as if you need to treasure her and handle her as fragile because she's the weaker vessel. But you have men that would exploit that because they know that they weaker. That you're weaker than them and they're stronger than you. They take full advantage of their physical domination over you. But then you have some men who they woman might can go around or two with them. Them the ones that use the guns and the weapons and have other stuff to control the woman or the man with. So they both operate in the idea of being superior over the other one. And some abusive men even have particular body types that they prefer. We'll talk about that another time. So then now we're talking about victims need immediate separation from the abusers. Now we're going to talk about police right here. You guys really can't read all that. I know you can't. If you want a copy of this PowerPoint, just ask me. I will send it to you. But I want to pay attention to the fact that police departments can weed out violent cops by domestic violence complaints. You'll be surprised how many officers get domestic violence complaints against them from their spouses. Why are they still on the force? Domestic violence is a crime. And the likelihood of an officer who beats his wife committing acts of police brutality at the same time is extremely high. If he's beating his wife at home, best believe he's going to be beating victims out there on the street. He's violent. So if you got an officer that you know is being violent at home against his spouse, you have a duty to get that officer off the street. As a police chief, as a police commissioner, you have an obligation to get them off the street. And do they have a legal right to get them off the street? Yes, because in the law enforcement code of ethics, that's the reason why I have this up here, it says that I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or to my agency. So based on that statement right there, police departments are well within their rights to fire and get rid of police officers based on domestic violence complaints against them from their spouses. So do police departments have a way of weeding out people that are prone to police brutality? Yes, by their domestic violence complaints from their spouses. Over 40% of officers on the force have domestic violence complaints from their spouse. More than one complaint. Officers being called to officers' houses for beating their wives. And those are the same officers getting the police brutality complaints. So we do got a way to weed out. Now, they may not be able to get all the racist ones up out of there, because not every racist guy is beating their wife, because really they only hate blacks. So most of the time they not beating their white wife. They just beat us. Because that's who they hate. Okay? But we do have a way of getting rid of some of the abusive officers by their domestic violence complaints against them. And the department needs to have a zero tolerance for it. Zero tolerance for officers with domestic violence complaints against them, because what does the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics say? I will keep my private life, your marriage, your home life, unsullied as an example to all, and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or my agency. That's the police officer's code of ethics. If you beating your wife, that automatically brings discredit to you as a police officer. That automatically brings this. What if you get called on a domestic violence charge and you at home beating your own wife? You're more likely to let that person free or not take that woman's complaint seriously. So there is more that the police department can be doing to weed out bad cops. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're talking about today. Now, as far as people that are in domestic violence relationships at home, you do need immediate separation from your abuser as well. And I know for a lot of people in those situations that separation might not be as easy. But it can be. Get you some kind of resources in order. And make sure that when you leave, you are not returning to the situation. Don't put yourself back in harm's way. Now, I can't tell you that I've never seen my husband since we separated, but I've never put myself back in harm's way. I have my own place. Okay, so don't ever put yourself back in harm's way. Separate, run, do what you got to do. If you got to move to another state, move to another state. But what I will tell you is if you leave, don't go back. Make sure it's a permanent separation. Okay? So that's what we talked about today. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I tried to keep it under an hour. We're over a little bit. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, you guys. I love you and good night.